The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Reaper Apparel Company. Reaper Apparel offers a casual line of superb fit, finish, and comfort. We design for those who refuse to die slowly and choose to live untamed. For those who aren't afraid to face the dark, for the ones that thrive in it, and for those who can appreciate life through a grim lens. That's Reaper Apparel Company. Go to the link in the description of this episode, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my own personal merch store, the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. I have hats, I have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, water bottles, notebooks, you name it, I've got it. The description and the link for that will be in the description of this episode. Also, right now, if you use the promo code WELCOME, I will give you 5% off of your first purchase. That's the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Tactical Brotherhood, all American-made apparel, which helps support the Second Amendment. You can also find all this in the description of this episode with the link, Tactical Brotherhood. Part of every proceed does go to helping veterans, as it is a very good cause. All American-made products made right here in Minnesota. Go and check them out. Use the promo code PATRIOT15 to get 15% off your purchase. Now, let's start the show. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ride Home Rants podcast. This is, as always, your host, Mike Bono. I have a great guest for us today. My guest today comes to us. He's the current defensive coordinator and linebackers coach at Brown University. He is also a former Bethany College coach, so I'm having another former Bethanian on the show, and I love talking to him. But Coach Tim Weaver joins the show. Coach, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it. Hey, always good to get back to talk to people with Bethany ties. It was a really good time in my life and my family's life. So,
absolutely, I enjoyed my time at Bethany too as well. We were there around the same time. Got to announce a lot of your games at Bethany. I was the head sports director for the radio station in my time there, so it was a lot of fun getting to announce your guys' games and seeing the progression of that. But currently, like I said, you're a defensive coordinator at Brown University. How long have you been at Brown, and how did the 2023 season go for you guys?
Yeah, we've been here now as a staff for 5 years and 4 seasons. The Ivy League didn't play in 20 because of COVID, so we came here. I had been at University of Delaware after I left Bethany. Then I came here with James Perry, who's our head coach, and we took over a program with a really good history that had kind of gone sideways the last couple of years before we got hired. We took over and really had a rebuilding job on our hands and had a couple of 2 and 8 years and then a 3 and 7 year. And then this year we finished 5 and 5 for the best year at Brown since 2016. It's exciting. We got a really good team coming back. When you look at the history of Brown from 2000 to 2009, Brown won 3 Ivy League championships and won more games than any other program in the league. And I actually coached at Harvard and Columbia during half of that time, and I know how good Brown was then. So we're almost back to where the program should be, and we've got a bunch of good players coming back, and we've had success recruiting. So it's been a lot of fun, and now it's time to reap the rewards of a lot of this hard work, from getting our teeth kicked in for a couple of years to now being pretty good. So.
Yeah, we're going to get into it.
Our first year, we were losing to Princeton, I want to say 52-7 at halftime, and then we beat them this year. So all that upward trajectory is fun to watch.
Absolutely. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I know you're used to that, the rebuilding, what you had to do at Bethany when you took over the program there, and you made it a lot of fun to watch those guys. But you've actually had at Bethany 3 of our former guests on the show: Bill Garvey, Andy Upton, and Mr. Askew. Could you talk about how you met them and why hired them for your staff at Bethany?
Yeah, those guys were all on our initial coaching staff, and then Andy and Bill were with me the whole time. Mr. left after a couple years. So I met Bill a million years ago. I coached at Hofstra University. on some really, really good teams. We had a bunch of NFL players. We won. We went to the FCS playoffs. We were a state-of-the-art program in the East and one of the best in the country. And Bill ended up going to Hofstra after I left, but was connected to a bunch of guys that I knew. And they recommended him to me when I was coaching at Harvard, and we got him on staff. So we worked together for a couple of years at Harvard. And then I left for Columbia. He stayed at Harvard. He ended up going to Stonehill. And then when I got the head job at Bethany, he was my first phone call to get on as our offensive coordinator. So I was able to bring him along, which was great. And then, as you know, when I left for Delaware, he took over and stayed on as the head coach for 7 or 8 more years after I left. So that worked out great for him. Andy Upton and I actually coached together at West Virginia Wesleyan in the late 90s. But he had, since I left Wesleyan and went to Harvard and Columbia before I came to Bethany, Andy had ended up at Bethany. So he was on staff there when I got hired. He was also coaching track. So that was an easy one to keep. And Mr. was one of the young graduate assistants that were on staff. And there were a bunch of those guys. We kept 4 of them actually, that were really good young coaches. Mr. was one of them, Ryan Lieb, Andrew Rossi, and Bob Neisel. We kept all 4 of those guys. And they've all moved on to stuff in and out of coaching, and they're doing great. And it was a really good crew. But so that's kind of how those guys all came about on that first staff, and we just started recruiting our asses off and tried to bring in players and get the thing going in the right direction, which we were able to do.
And now I know I asked Upton this when he was on the show, but do you guys remember trying to recruit me when I was already at Bethany when you were there? Me and a bunch of guys were just hanging around. I can't remember where we were at. I think we were at the field. We were just throwing football, just killing some time. And I remember you two coming up to me and being like, "You got a hell of an arm. Do you ever think about playing football?" I was like, "I'm on a swimming scholarship here. I'm not trying to screw anything up for that." But how much of recruiting internally did you have to do when you first took over at Bethany?
Well, it was different. I mean, I remember seeing you guys out there, and every time you see it, there was sort of a little bit of a high school element to it, where you tell a high school coach to recruit the hallways, right? You get a big, tall kid or a big, heavy kid walking down the hallway, you want those high school coaches to recruit him. So we did a little bit of that on campus, but mostly it was re-recruiting the good players that were left from Coach Lee's staff when we took over. And there were some good ones. We inherited some guys who could really play. And so just keeping those guys and not having them get faraway eyes. And I think we did a good job of that first off season and first spring. I think we set a good tone. And, to get 4 wins that first year after coming off the 3 straight 1-9s, I think it just kind of breathed life into everybody involved with the program, including the alums. We started to get more attendance at our golf outing. We started to raise more money. There were more people calling the office and stopping by, and homecoming became a really big thing again. And so I think that first year's moderate success that we had went a long way towards kind of keeping it to where ultimately, Bill took them to a postseason game after I left, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, you've had, quite the extensive coaching background, but when you were at Hofstra, I mean, you said it, and you had some NFLers. I believe it was legendary New York Jet wide receiver Wayne. I'm probably going to butcher his last name. Charbet. Can you talk to us about
Wayne Corbett? Yeah, Wayne was our best player for a couple of years. We also had Dave Fiore, who played a long time in the NFL on the offensive line for the 49ers. I actually recruited Raheem Morris, who is now the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. He played for us. He was a really good player. And then after I left, Marcus Colston, Samoro Lyman, an unbelievable, an all-pro safety, Lance Schulters. So the talent level at Hofstra was really, really high. We were good. And then Gio Carmazzi was the quarterback who was there my last spring. He was one of the guys that got drafted ahead of Tom Brady in that draft. So there was a run of players that came through there that was really, really fun to coach and be around, and helped us win a lot of games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely having that kind of talent on a team. Now, you're not unfamiliar with, NFL stars. Your time at Harvard, I believe it was quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick was there as well, too, as what?
It was, Harvard. Yeah. Fitz's freshman year, he was our scout team quarterback. And we on defense, and I was there with Lou Anarumo, who's now the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, was our secondary coach. And Lou and I would stand watching practice every day and say, are we nuts, or is this guy really, really good? And we were not nuts. He was really good. And we saw it as a scout team player, and he was awesome to be around. He's a great kid. He's now a great man. He's got a whole bunch of kids running around, a great family. He had a great career, and now he's doing an awesome job on TV. So, he's another one who's pretty close with Bill, because Bill was at Harvard after I left. So I left actually after Fitz's sophomore year, I think. And then we had won a championship, and then they won another one before he graduated after I left. So, so Fitz was there, and so we've been around, been fortunate to be around a lot of good players. Helps you keep your coaching career long when you get good players.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't hurt to have players like that. So, what's it been like coaching at schools and going and seeing all these former players, make the NFL and having success? What's that like as a coach?
It's really rewarding and gratifying. And, if you can even have just a little bit to do with the success those guys have. And our last year at Delaware, we've got Bilal Nichols, who started in defensive tackle for the Raiders right now. He just scored a touchdown the other day. Troy Reeder, who's active with the Rams. We had Zach Kerr, who played for a number of years, who was another defensive lineman for us. We had Nazir Adderley, who played 3 years for the Chargers. All those guys played defense for us at Delaware, and it was no surprise by the time we left. We took over a defense at Delaware that was, not very good. And by the time we left, we were top 25 in the country in just about every statistical category there was. And it wasn't, we ran the same defense as we ran at Bethany, and we had NFL guys out there doing it. So it's always more about the players than it is about the plays. And those guys were awesome, and it's been fun to watch their careers move on. And now we actually had a guy our first year here at Brown, Michael Hoyt, who played defensive tackle for us and is now starting at outside linebacker for the Rams. He's playing for Raheem. So the guy I coached as a senior is playing for a guy I recruited a million years ago, and that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely seeing the success that you have with players and things like that and of that nature. Definitely has to be rewarding as a coach, but let's talk a little bit more about your time at Bethany. That, like I said earlier in the show, it was a big turnaround for when you took over and engineering the turnaround and the tenure there. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like going when you took over from the consecutive 1-9 seasons before your arrival to going 4-6 in your first year? What was that like, and what did you have to do to make all that happen?
Well, putting the staff together was number one. I was a very defensive-minded guy. I have been my whole career. So I knew I was going to have my fingers in that, but I needed to get Bill on board, somebody that I could completely trust to do the offense. So once we had the staff put together, then it was, just go recruit like crazy. And then we figured out that we had some guys there that, maybe for whatever reason hadn't had as much success, or it wasn't a good scheme fit with Coach Lee's staff, or whatever it is. Whenever you take over as a new coach coming into a situation that's not winning, everybody, it drives me nuts in our profession. Guys say, we're going to change the culture. Well, I hadn't lived a day in the culture. I didn't know if the culture was good, bad. Maybe the players stunk. Maybe there was no scheme fit. I had no idea. All I knew what had to change was the results. So we went in and established our cult. I don't know if we changed it or made it better or made it worse, but we established what we wanted to do. And it started with the off season. In Division III, the off season is, you can't make it mandatory. You can't take attendance. You can't penalize kids for not coming. But we made it very clear that we were going to have high expectations and really work those guys in the off season or first spring practice. And to the players' credit, we lost very few of them. We had very little attrition. The attitude got really positive. I think they liked what I said to them all the time was, we're going to run a Division III program with a Division I attitude. And so we're going to show up every day. We're going to practice hard. Our daily schedule, we were allowed to have them, wasn't going to be any different than any of the Division I places I had been. We were going to push it and try to schematically be as complex as we could and just kind of drive the whole thing forward. And like everything, Brent Owens we got lucky and inherited a guy that could play quarterback really well. And then we left and Milton took over for him after that. And we ended up those first 2 years with really gifted players at quarterback that we didn't recruit. Bill coached the hell out of me, did a great job, and we had a bunch of other guys on offense that played really well. But those guys were already on campus, and I think we just used them right and pushed the buttons and motivated and did whatever. And I remember a couple of those games, we were down 21-0 at Ohio Wesleyan, and we won that game. I think that gave the guys a whole bunch of confidence that first year that we won at Thomas More, which was really hard to do at the time. So a couple of those wins really boosted confidence, and then it gave us more momentum going into recruit, the following couple of years to just kind of sustain it.
Yeah, I mean, you had your first 4 years of Bethany. I mean, from 2006 to 2009, it was 4-6, 4-6, 3-7, 3-7. Now, you had numerous record-setting players during that time. While those years were not all winning seasons, they were impressive in the things that you were able to accomplish. Like I said, I announced every home game for you guys. What was the first 4-year stretch like for you there?
It was really two-year stretches. I say that all the time. We inherited a pretty good locker room of talent and were able to eke out those 2 4-win seasons. But a couple of those losses were, I remember Teal the first year, they blew our doors off. W&J crushed us to bits. And then even the 3 and 7 years, we may have lost a couple of games by 2 or 3 scores, but we didn't get run out of the building by anybody. So those 3 and 7 teams, I always say, were a little more competitive. But what happened was we got really young, really fast. Like, we had some decent players that we inherited. We recruited some better, younger players, but they weren't better at the time. We knew in 2 years they would be ultimately better than the guys that we had inherited, but they didn't give us the best chance to win those first 2 years after we recruited them. So those 3 and 7 years, we knew were going to lead to the next 2 years where we were going to have a chance to really compete like crazy, because we had a deeper, more talented roster. So getting to the next 2 years where we had the first back-to-back non-losing seasons at Bethany in, I don't know how long time. But that first 4-year stretch paved the way for that. It was become competitive every week. We're never going to get off the bus and feel like we're down 21-0 to W&J. Like, I could see in their eyes the first year, there was nobody that thought they had a chance. Teal was coming off a playoff season. W&J is always really good. And our guys, I think, were that stupid coaching phrase. They were a little afraid of the jerseys on the other team more than the guys. So we had to get that fixed and removed from the process. But to the players' credit, they did. Over those first 4 years, they became, they got to where they were going to get off the bus and compete against anybody we played.
Yeah, I mean, you like you said, you guys did get real young real quick there. I remember watching and talking about Eric Walker, 1,000-yard season. Every time he touched the ball, you knew he was rushing for 1,000. Matt Grimard, all the receivers, and of course, got to mention him, the wonderful manager now of this podcast, Johnny Fiddy Falconi, and everything like that. We're going to get to him in a minute, don't worry. That's for sure. But you also took over as the AD at Bethany for a period of time as well. What was it like being the AD and coaching? Did one help the other or vice versa?
It was a lot. No, I don't know that one helped or hurt the other. It's really it's a unique situation in Division III athletics. You don't have the time demands as the athletic director that you would in a Division I in terms of the travel and the constant fundraising when you're a coach as well as being the AD. I think the ideal model is to have an athletic director that can focus on fundraising and alumni relations and a little bit of the scheduling and making sure, because Division III coaches all want it, they want to do their own schedule, they want to all buy their own equipment, which made it easy for me. I didn't have to get involved in a lot of that unless something went wrong. Like, I wasn't planning vans for Coach Klein with her volleyball team when they were winning all their matches. She handled all that herself. She was great. All the other coaches did all that stuff. So I think it takes a lot of the pressure off the AD in Division III when coaches do a lot of that. What operation, like our operations guy here at Brown does all of that. We have no idea until the day before we're going somewhere, what time we're leaving, if we're taking a bus or taking a plane. We just show up and go where we're told. So having the coaches in Division III do that helped me a ton. I think my biggest thing there with Dr. Miller, who was so heavily involved in athletics, was just managing the budget, managing the people, trying to make sure that everything was professional and above board, and kind of just raising the level of everybody as much as we could. But it was, I don't know that either position helped or hurt the other while I was doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I know what it entails, being coaching and then trying to run something else too as well. It's a lot.
The personnel changes were the biggest thing. When we made the change at swimming coach, we made a change at we added field hockey. So some of those things, those hiring process, Aaron Huffman left our men's basketball program. We had to hire a new guy there. So those things that I was really involved in on a day-to-day basis, those did take time. Those were, that was when it got a little more challenging to do both with the personnel stuff. But for the most part, I was able to compartmentalize it and not have to do everything that a standalone athletic director would have to do.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, you were part of this. This next guy was the part of your first recruiting class in 2006, and that is Johnny Fiddy Falconi. What was it like coaching Fiddy? I know how he is today and the energy level that he has. So what was it like coaching a guy like that?
I think we said this about Fiddy 3 times a week. If his talent had matched his energy, he would play in the NFL for 20 years. He was just a high energy, I'll do anything coach. I'll run into the goalpost. He was awesome to have on the team. He was never a guy who, he was never going to be our most talented player. He was never going to be our fastest guy, our most gifted guy. And he never came in and gave the old woe is me and I should be playing instead of this guy or this guy or this guy. He understood and accepted his role, and he was awesome to have in there. And his first play that he ever played in a varsity game actually was on defense. I can't remember who we were playing, but we were winning. And I thought he was scheduled to go back in on offense on the next series, but then we thought that the game might end before we got the ball back. So I just turned and grabbed him on the sideline and said, go play safety. Just go in there and play safety for these 3 plays. So, and as sure as it would happen, to the second to last play of the game, the ball gets tipped up in the air in the end zone, and Fiddy's running under it like he's going to get a pick, and he didn't catch it. And he could have had an interception it would have sent the place into a frenzy because, everybody loved him. Teammates loved him. He was a fan favorite. And I'm happy for him to see, he got married recently, I know. And, he's coached here and there and done some stuff. And it's just, again, he's another guy that, didn't set any records and didn't make any big plays and any big wins, but it's just as rewarding as his old coach to see him doing well as it is to see anybody else who, Eric Walker was our all-time rushing leader, and I'm happy that he's doing awesome. But it's at this point in their lives, he's no different to me than Fiddy. They're both guys who did everything we asked of them and helped us win in different ways. And it's great to see him having success now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I tell Fiddy a couple times a week, like, hey man, can we pump the brakes a little bit, on what you're doing? I'm happy you're on board here at the Ride Home Rants podcast, and you're helping me out, and we're growing this thing. But my guy, I need to pump the brakes a little bit, and I wish I had a third of your energy to make it through my busy schedule and everything like that. But, Coach, we are running down near the end of the episode here, but I do have to get this segment in. This did lead into this last final segment, and I'm sure you've gotten a lot of these through your time and knowing him, but it is the Fast Fiddy 5. 5 random questions from the wonderful manager of the podcast, Johnny Fiddy Falconi. And
Let's do it.
For the new listeners out there, these are kind of rapid fire, but you can elaborate if you need to. And Coach, I don't think these have anything to do with what we've been talking about for the entirety of the show. So, Fiddy, if you're ready, let's.
You gotta be able to think on your feet.
All right. Question number 1: is it harder to win a World Series or an NBA championship in pro sports?
World Series.
Okay.
I think it's harder. Baseball's harder to play than basketball. You could assemble a team in basketball that should never lose. if your two best pitchers have a bad day in the World Series, it's going to be really hard. And that's more likely to happen than Steph Curry going over. So I'd say winning a World Series.
Absolutely. All right. Question number 2. Who is a better NFL coach, Pete Carroll or Mike McCarthy?
I got a personal bias. I'm going to go with Pete. I've known Pete for a long time. He was at the Jets while we were at Hofstra. He's a great guy. I'm going to go Pete.
Okay.
Plus, he's got, I think has he been to 2 Super Bowls? Mike's only been to 1. I know Mike won has.
Yeah.
But I think Pete 2. So.
All right. Question number 3. Who's more athletic, pro tennis players or pro golfers?
Tennis players. As a rule, I think tennis players. They just got to move more. Start and stop is an underrated physical skill. The amount of times tennis players have to stop is incredible to me.
Okay. I feel like these first 3 were set-up questions for the last 2 here, because if you know Fiddy here, now we're getting into those. Question number 4. What is better, a grilled cheese sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. I love both. And when you have kids, I say this all the time, hot dogs, grilled cheese, mac and cheese, and peanut butter and jelly come back into your life when you have kids and you don't know why you stopped eating them in your 20s. But I'm going to give a slight edge to peanut butter and jelly. Makes sense more times during the day. Peanut butter and jelly is good for breakfast.
Okay. I definitely get that with the kids. My son lives on hot dogs, grilled cheese, and mac and cheese, so I definitely get it. Question number 5. Who wins in a fight of 3 kangaroos versus a polar bear?
That's a good question. I'll give Fiddy props for that one. I'm going to go with the kangaroos. I think 3 kangaroos, as strong as those kicks are, if they surrounded the polar bear, they could body blow them, get them on the ground, and ultimately win that. One of the kangaroos is going to end up dead, though.
Yeah.
But 3 of them, they probably end up winning. I have less confidence in that answer than my other ones, though.
Okay.
That's a really good question.
Okay. And that was the Fast Fiddy 5. And I got to tell you, Coach, he's had a strange obsession with animal questions in this segment. There's always at least one in every one. And knowing him as long as you have, how many times at practice have you had to answer those questions for Fiddy?
Well, the what ifs that came out of him, like, well, what if, it was crazy. So those, and then the silly hypotheticals like that. That's college kids are into those now. I mean, we have those arguments out here at Brown. Would you rather fight 10,000 ants or 10 miniature grizzly bears or some stupid thing like that? And these guys have these arguments and they're passionate about their answers, and I don't get it, but it's funny. So the 3 kangaroos against the polar bear, that fits right into what's going on, what I deal with most of the time.
Absolutely. Like I said, Coach, we are running down near the end of the episode here, and I do give every guest this opportunity at the end of the show. I'm going to give you about a minute if there's anything you want to get out there, whether it's for Brown, anything else that you got going on, or even if it's just a good message. I'm going to give you about a minute. The floor is yours, Coach.
I'd love to just tell everybody, the quality of football in this league, Ivy League football, not just Brown, but the Ivy League in general, is really tremendous. And we've got to deal with ESPN Plus. So if you have the ESPN app or ESPN Plus, you can watch every Ivy League football game. And it's really competitive. It's really good. The league's got a bunch of great rivalries in it. So I would recommend that for everybody to watch more Ivy League and FCS football in general. Look at the league I left when I was in Delaware, the CAA with teams like Villanova and William and Mary and Richmond and New Hampshire. Those teams are great and they're fun to watch. And I think those games can be better sometimes than some of the group of 5 stuff that you get stuck with that can be a little less competitive. So just putting a plug in for FCS football and Ivy League football. And then, for any of the younger people out there watching, just the Ivy League's a real thing. Like we've signed, for your audience, the last 3 years, we've taken 3 West Virginia kids just at Brown. So that's a real goal. So, do your work in school, put the work in, and that's a realistic opportunity for everybody. So you could end up wherever you want.
Absolutely, Coach. I love it when people can promote on here, but I also love it when there's a good message like that. I don't think a lot of people know about the Ivy League in football or any sporting, really, in that. But you know what? They produce NFL talent, it seems like, from what your track record and everything like that. So great for that. And, you know, for the FCF, I will be checking you out come next season, Coach. I will tell you that. I do watch and keep up and follow everybody that has been on the show too as well. So you're just another notch in that. I will be checking out. I am a huge fan of ESPN Plus and everything like that. So Brown is now on the Bono's watch list here for you coming up in next season for 2024. I will be rooting for you, Coach. Absolutely, for sure. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ride Home Rants podcast. I want to again thank my guest, Coach Tim Weaver, for coming on, taking time out of his busy schedule to sit and talk with me. As always, if you enjoyed the show, be a friend, tell a friend. If you didn't, tell them anyways. They might like it just because you didn't. That's going to do it for me, and I will see y'all next week. The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by W Energy. Energy drinks made for gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. For gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. Go to the link in the description where you can find the best energy drinks out there. Less caffeine than a cup of coffee. Also, no jitters and no crash afterwards. Use the promo code Mike Bono and get yourself 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my favorite sponsor of the show, and that is Shankit Golf. Golf apparel made for the everyday golfer. We might not go out and shoot a 6 under par. We're probably going to shoot a 6 over par, but this is going to give us the gear that's going to help us rock it on and off of the course. Go to the link in the bio, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get yourself 10% off there as well.